A short while ago, I non-stop played Cypher during the Cypher to Ascendant series, and in those weeks I learned a lot of things. And I have good news for all the potential Cypher mains out there. Today is the day I'm gonna share everything I learned. In this video I'm gonna give you some Cypher tips and tricks, show some mechanics, and end with the ultimate question: is Cypher a good agent to rank up with? You'll soon find out, my friends, but first let's talk about the abilities. The Cypher Cam, probably the most iconic ability of this agent. This ability is very useful during your games, but man oh man, it's hard to control when you first pick up Cypher. You basically constantly have to look at two spots at the same time, and my one brain cell can't handle that. But no worries, here's some tips. On the defender side, you really only have two types of cam spots: aggressive and defensive spots. Each way of placing your cam has their own benefits. For an aggressive spot, you can place your cam anywhere to look deep into the enemy territory. Here on Split, for example. With this type of cam you can get some early info, but the problem is that it's easy to spot for the enemy, so it can get destroyed really fast. Alternatively, you could also place it a bit more to the back, like over here. Again, you get info a little bit earlier, but the first thing what the enemies will see if they push is your cam, so there's a high chance that they will destroy it. On the other hand, you have defensive spots, like this camera over here. With this type of cam, you can't really look deep into the enemy territory, but you know exactly when the enemies are pushing. This makes holding the site very easy for you, and on top of all this, because the enemies are distracted when they push, there's not a high chance that they will destroy your cam. So the tip I can give you before the round starts: always think about which type of cam do I want to use this round. And now the attacker side. On the attacker side, I found three ways that you could use your cam. First, you can use it to catch the lurk. Effective, but it can be quite boring. The second way you can use your cam is to use it in the post plant. This is the trick that I use the most, and you can exactly see if the enemy is defusing or not. This makes winning the post plant so easy. Take a look at this round, for example. In this round I heard the enemy defusing, I used my cam and I saw that nobody was on, so I didn't have to do a dangerous peek.
Fake, dude.
One enemy remaining.
Yep. Okay, yo.
And the last way you could use your cam on the attacker side, this is kinda of a bonus way. When you're about to peek something, place your cam first, but instead of looking through your cam, you just gotta peek immediately and hope that the enemies will shoot on your cam instead of you. You might distract them and get an easy kill. Now let's move on to the Cypher cage. This one is way easier to explain. Most of the time you're gonna use the cage just as a smoke, a way to block the vision of the enemies. But as we all know, the Cypher cage has a unique mechanic, and that's if the enemies are walking through it, you can hear it.
30 seconds left.
So here's an important tip. Sometimes you see that something is smoked, for example vent on Split, and even though you see that it is already smoked, it doesn't hurt to also throw your cage on it when you want to push heaven. Why, you might ask? Well, a lot of times, especially in the lower elos, people are pushing through the smokes, but if you throw your Cypher cage on it, you will hear it and then you can turn around immediately. And another tip for this ability: one-ways are your best friend, my friends. And it's often very easy to create one-ways. You just have to find a ledge above an entrance. For example, here on Split, over here on Split, here on Haven, and one of my favorites, this ledge on Garage.
Player standing.
120 Erman.
Tripwire. I got a question for you. Where does the trip in Tripwire stand for? Take a guess, I will wait a sec. Exactly, my friends. The trip in Tripwire stands for triple check. I think this is one of the most important tips for Cypher. If you use your Tripwire, always triple check to see if the enemies can jump over it or not. Take over here on Bind, for example. This looks like a decent trip spot, right? Enemies can't jump from here over it and not from here. Well, in fact, there's a small little bucket where the enemies can jump on and then they get over. So always triple check your Tripwires. But now let me give you an important tip about this ability. Sometimes it doesn't matter if the enemies can jump over your tripwire from one specific side. Huh? What do you mean? Well, take here on Haven, for example. If you place your tripwire over here, it looks like a bad tripwire spot because the enemies can just jump over it. But in fact, if you are planning to push A, it's not a bad spot. If you're pushing A, no enemy will be on the grass side of the tripwire, so they can't jump over it anyway. And by placing it a bit closer to the T-spawn, the enemies won't be able to make it to grass and make a sneaky kill from here. But Mr. Lowlander, what if you are rotating? Then the tripwire sucks. Well, the good thing about the tripwire, if you pick it up, it doesn't have a cooldown. So when you are rotating, you just pick it up and place it somewhere else. Actually a pretty easy ability to use. But let me give you one more very essential tip. If you want to place your tripwire down at the perfect height, you have to crouch and aim a little bit above you, so the tripwire just touches your head. By doing this, the enemies won't be able to jump over it or go under it. This type of tripwire is perfect to catch enemies lurking, but it's not always the right type of wire to use. Here's what I mean. When you're holding a site defensively and you use this type of wire, when the enemies are walking through it, they can easily destroy it because the wire is on head level. Instead, what you should be doing is place your wire very low on the ground. This type of wire is bad to catch enemies lurking because they can jump over it, but when they are pushing, they might not notice it and they're gonna walk straight through it, and then it's hard for them to destroy because it's not on head level anymore. And then you get some easy kills. Now let's move on to the Cypher ultimate. This is like the simplest ability in the world. When you get an enemy, the only thing you have to do is spam it like this.
Give me a call. Give
And then it's important to do things with the information you're getting. Like in this round, I used my ultimate, I spotted that everybody was on A, and then you gotta rotate, of course, you're not gonna push A. That's what we did, and easy win.
Wow, my eyes are down.
Let's move on to the next part of the video, Cypher combos. All the individual abilities of Cypher are decent, but the real reason why Cypher is so good is because his abilities are working very good together. So when you want to rank up with Cypher fast, it's important that you know some combos that you can use. Here's some examples. The first one, place your tripwire anywhere deep, stand far away around the corner and use your cage on yourself. Now when the enemies are walking through your tripwire, you're gonna cage yourself and shoot the enemy through your smoke.
Oh, it worked.
I know, it's a very nasty way to get kills. The most common combo you can use on any map is this one. First place a defensive cam that's hard to destroy, over here on Ascent for example. Then a bit further down the road you place a tripwire, and on that wire you throw a cage. If possible, even a one-way cage, like over here on Ascent. Then you stand a little bit further towards the side, use your cam to see if the enemies are walking towards the tripwire. When they are doing that, activate your cage and kill them.
Cage triggered. Careful now.
This is one of the most common combos you can use on every map. On Pearl for example, same principle, easy kills.
I got him.
Now one more tippy about the combos, one very nasty trick is using two tripwires back to back. Often enemies will walk through the first tripwire, destroy it, and then they think, oh, I destroyed the wire, I can just walk forward now. And then they walk into the second one and you get an easy kill. Just look at the Jet in this clip for example.
Cage triggered.
That's it. 2 traps back to back. That's why you place 2 traps back to back.
Now let's move on to the playstyle of Cypher. Let's start with the attacker side. On the attacker side, Cypher is usually the player that watches the flanks and goes for the lurk himself. In fact, in most team comps, Cypher is the best agent to lurk with. The reason for this is that if you push with your team, you don't have a lot of value for your teammates. You don't have a flash, your tripwire and cam are usually behind you, and it's pretty hard to get the cage on the spots where you want them to be. It's not like an omen smoke that you can place everywhere. So because you're basically useless when pushing with your team, Cypher is the agent to lurk with. Here on Lotus for example, you place your tripwire to defend your teammates, and then you go sneaky peeky through B or C and get an easy kill there.
What did he do?
Just don't lurk on the same path every round, sometimes you go B and sometimes you go A. Now the defender side. The defender side is pretty easy with Cypher. Like I said before, you're first gonna see if you want to do an aggressive or defensive setup. Then you do your setup and play the game. As we all know, most Valorant maps have 2 sides, so often there are 3 teammates holding one side and 2 the other side. And because Cypher has such a strong defense, it's recommended that you go to the side with less people. You could even go for the tricky where you're solo on side and send all your teammates to another side, play a bit on the back, and if the enemies are pushing you, try to get a kill with the smoke and tripwire, and then fall back and go for the retake. Let's move on. In the next minute I'm gonna try to give you as many Cypher tricks as possible. Ready? Go. Try to place your Cypher cam as high as possible. The higher, the harder it is to spot for the enemies. You can place it higher by jumping. Try to place a deep tripwire so now and then. Wait in front of the barrier, and when the barriers are going down, place your tripwire deep. Often the enemies don't expect it and easy kills.
Traps on
If possible, try to place your tripwire somewhere in front of the entrance. On Haven, for example, don't place it over here, but place it over here. This makes it harder for the enemies to destroy your wire. Be careful with tapping your cam a lot in a small amount of time. Every time you look in your cam, it makes a lot of sound, so the enemies will hear it. If you crouch and then use your cam, you keep crouched. An essential mechanic if you don't want your head showing above things. Try to learn some cage lineups. At first I thought they weren't that useful, but I mean look at this clip. I just peek first and then I throw my cages. Like at this point the cages were useless, because if there was an enemy I would have been one-tapped anyway. Try to set up your traps and camps on spots where you can wallbang the enemy. Over here on Pearl for example. And if an enemy ever walks through your tripwire, always call it out to your teammates. 9 out of 10 times your teammates don't pay attention to your tripwires, so it's your responsibility to say that there's a lurker or something. That was 1 minute, and now the big question: is Cypher a good agent to rank up with? For beginners, I think Cypher is very hard to learn, so it takes a bit of time before you get the hang of this agent, but once you get the hang of it, he's so OP. So definitely try this agent out, my friends. For more Cypher tips and tricks, you can watch the series by clicking the video on the top left. Thank you for watching, and I see you guys in the next one. Peace.